Guizhong was the late God of Dust who lived over 3,700 years ago, and as you might be able to tell from the 2 videos I've made on her already, she is my favorite character in the game. In the previous videos I made about her, I went over her lore and her secrets respectively. This time, I'll go in depth into her lore and history, as well as my thoughts and speculation on everything about her, which probably means this is going to turn out to be a very long video. Also, a quick disclaimer here, the lore of this game can be very vague and confusing at times, and combined with the fact that this is a speculation video, some things may not be entirely accurate. However, I've done my best to connect everything in a way that works, so hopefully it turns out alright. So if you like this video, consider subscribing. It helps me out a lot and I'd really appreciate it. Anyways, let's move right on and get into the video. Thousands of years ago, before the Archon War and before the founding of Liyue Harbor, the God of Dust Guizhong descended upon the mortal realm. Her appearance was that of a young woman with billowing sleeves, and while she was not particularly strong, she was still a gentle and kind god who looked after humanity and understood their troubles. She formed a civilization in an unknown place somewhere in Liyue, and used her intellect to assist her people by teaching them how to farm and tend to the land. She would also write 4 commandments for her people to live by. Teach with wisdom, be bound by virtue, fortify the bones, unite in ambition. Eventually, Guizhong met another god, the god of Geo, Morax. They met among the glazed lilies, which back then bloomed quite commonly all throughout Liyue. Here, Guizhong gave Morax a stone dumbbell known as the Memory of Dust, which she said contained all of her knowledge, and she also presented it as a challenge to see if he could unlock it. Even though there was no formal contract between the 2 gods, he accepted it as a mark of their pledge, and thus the 2 became allies. Guizhong and Morax would both move their people north of Mount Tianheng, and would together form and rule over the Guili Assembly. With Guizhong's brain and Morax's brawn, the 2 would make their city a great one. The Guili Assembly was a massive territory jointly ruled by Guizhong and Morax, alongside other gods such as Marchosius, god of the stove, and adepti such as Cloud Retainer. Its name came from the 2 gods who formed it, Gui from Guizhong, and Li from the name Morax used at this time, which presumably was Zhongli. At its peak, the territory stretched as far south as Mount Tianheng, and as far north as Stone Gate. Guizhong had helped the people with farming and agriculture, and so there were farms throughout the entire span of the assembly, with the glazed lilies being a common flower in these times. I had also mentioned earlier that Guizhong had created 4 commandments for her people to live by, and these were put to use in the Guili Assembly. To unite in ambition is to be steadfast and immovable for all time. Wisdom is like water, it nourishes all those who receive it, and in it is a reflection of the truth. Fortify the bones, that movement be supple when the time comes. Virtue grows tall like a tree. Though there be shade, it will flourish forever. Guizhong was also friends with the adepti who helped rule the Guili Assembly, including Cloud Retainer. Guizhong, Morax, and Cloud Retainer would often meet atop Mount Aokang to eat together. With the aid of Cloud Retainer, Guizhong also constructed the Guizhong Ballista. This was an autonomous defense system that was stationed on Mount Tianheng in order to protect the people of the Guili Assembly. During her research into mechanics, Guizhong also acquired many different ancient and so-called evil artifacts. Among these were pieces of technology from Khaenri'ah, including rune guards and rune hunters. It seems a bit strange that technology like this existed in Teyvat 3,700 years ago, especially since Khaenri'ah was an underground nation, outside the gaze of the gods. Either way, these artifacts were stored in a domain that Guizhong created called the Realm of Clouds. It is located in Luhua Pool, a place which may have been part of the Guili Assembly. Luhua Pool is also said to have been an ancient garden, and with the Guili Assembly being known for farming and garden, it would make sense for it to be part of the Assembly. I would also like to bring up the Stones of Remembrance in the 9 Pillars of Peace world quest. As you offer Geoculi to the Liyue statues of the 7, you are given 9 Stones of Remembrance, which are used to unlock ruins in Kuje Slope, which appears to be just on the edge of the maximum area that the Guili Assembly could have been. You may be wondering why I'm bringing this item up, so let me read its description real quick. An unusual gemstone capable of removing a seal somewhere. You can feel the turbulent thoughts racing relentless within when you hold it in your hand. Somewhere in this world are buried the memories of an ancient war. For a future without the pain of savage slaughter. For a future without lives lived in vain. For a future where every day is filled with peace. The thing that stood out to me here was the line that says turbulent thoughts race relentlessly within this item. Basically, this item contains someone's memories, which connects back to the memory of dust, which contains Guizhong's memories. More so, the ruins that are unlocked with the help of the stones contains ruin machines, which is technology we know Guizhong had. It also does contain Geovicious hatchlings, so perhaps Morax and Guizhong built this place together. There is also an item to be found here called the Dull Ring, which appears to have a piece of jade within it. I'll get more into this item later on in the video. Either way, the prosperity of the Guili Assembly would not last forever. Around 3,700 years ago, a terrible and centuries-long war known as the Archon War began all throughout Teyvat, and Guizhong was one of its first casualties. As the Archon War began, Guizhong and Morax, alongside Marchosius and the other Adepti, defended the Guili Assembly against the many evil monsters and gods that dared to threaten them. Eventually though, during a fierce battle in which black dust choked the heavens and 1,000 rocks splintered, Guizhong would lose her life among the Glaze Lilies. Before she died, she told Morax to forget about the stone dumbbell that she gave him. However, he did not forget, and to this day he is still trying to find a way to unlock it. You can even see the dumbbell in one of Zhongli's idle animations, and a much larger version is used during his burst animation as well. Anyways, many of the details surrounding Guizhong's death are vague to say the least. All we really know is that Morax was there when she died, and it was among the Glazelies in the Guili Plains. However, the lore from the primordial Jade Cutter weapon has given me some more insight into what may have happened. They say that when Liyue first arose, Rex Lapis once walked the land with a sword hewn from jade. Despite the constant wear and tear of age, the jade edge, so bathed in blood, still retained a polished sheen as if brand new. The blood was washed away in the reign of 1,000 years, yet the thoughts and grudges that gathered about it could not be so easily eliminated. Nephrite has the soul of the Bishui's gentle heart, and will in time cleanse itself of the remnant grudges within. But who will ease the agony that the jade itself feels for having become an instrument of slaughter? These words of a friend long forgotten were both lament and sigh, but the inexorable gears of destiny would drown out those compassionate words. In the passing of many long years, many became mortal foes who once made merry together, while those who betrayed one another or fought to the death would come to share a drink, their hatred dispelled. So it was also with this precious sword, carved as it once was to be given as an expensive gift to a certain someone. This jade too was once cut for love of peace and luxury. When wine vessels are filled with blood, and when tender feelings are ripped asunder by cold ambition and reduced to dust on the wind, gifts ungiven and bonds unspoken will become sharp blades with which to cleave erstwhile friends. To make it simple, I believe the someone who is mentioned multiple times in this description is Guizhong. This means that the sword was originally meant as a gift for Guizhong, but as the Archon War began, Morax turned his blade against her. This may seem a bit out of the blue, but I do have my reasons for why this could be the case. In one of my older videos, I had said that perhaps Guizhong gained a certain piece of knowledge, and this knowledge was against the will of Celestia. If this is the case, it could be that Morax was ordered to kill her, much like how Orobashi was also sentenced to death for a similar reason. With Guizhong's extensive research into mechanics and ancient artifacts, her being in possession of this knowledge could be very likely. After she died, the Guili Assembly was also destroyed by a massive flood, the cause of which is currently unknown. Perhaps Guizhong's death upset the ley lines in some way, causing the tides to rise, but when a god dies, no matter how weak they are, they release an immense power, so perhaps Guizhong's death caused some of the land to turn to dust, which led to the waters flowing and the entire area flooding. Either way, after her death, the memory of Guizhong would slowly disappear from the people. Throughout the game, only a few characters make mention of her, most coming from mentions of her invention, the Guizhong Ballista. This weapon would go on to play a big part in modern Liyue, as it was used in the fights against both Osail and his wife Baicht. Still, as the memory of Guizhong left the people, so too would the glaze lilies. These days, only a few remain growing in the wild, with the rest being artificially planted in order to preserve the species. Now, with most records of Guizhong long forgotten, most of her story is left up to speculation. So now, let's dive into that. In the second volume of the book Records of the Gallant, there is a story about a maiden in a long indigo robe who once wandered the banks of the Bashui River. Due to the title of this volume, Dust, it is quite possible that this story has something to do with Guizhong. I'll briefly summarize the story here. The story tells of a mysterious figure, the maiden in the long indigo robe. An unknown amount of time ago, she wandered along the Bashui River in the Guili Plains, where the glaze lilies still bloomed. Her story was told by guests at Wangshu Inn, but still, they could only guess her true identity. Some thought she was a lost illuminated beast, while others thought she may have been a dead god's servant or just a gallant hero. However, her story came to an end when a certain hunter witnessed her fighting several perilous shadows. After the battle, all that was left was a pile of bloody dust, and the next day, corpses of Millilith soldiers and land surveyors were found by the river. Again though, no one knew why this maiden was here or what her goal was, and that's just where her story ends. Now, the details of the story don't align with the details provided of Guizhong's death from the Memory of Dust lore, so instead, I believe this maiden may have been a remnant of Guizhong, such as an apparition that appeared as a result of her lingering will. As for the reason this apparition would attack the Millilith, perhaps it was an act of revenge against Morax. Guizhong may have been content in her death, but still, over time her consciousness would fade away, and an apparition made from her will may only remember that she was killed by Morax and would thus seek revenge against him, not knowing any of the other details. This would be similar to Ejda's story. He forgot the reason why he was sealed and went after Morax for getting the contract he had made. Erosion has always been a major part of Liyue's stories, so having Guizhong being affected by erosion too would not be much of a surprise. Now, earlier I had mentioned an item known as the Dull Ring, and how it appears to have a piece of jade embedded within it. This ring had become dull due to erosion, but was not dirty due to it being stored in a box. Engraved on the ring was an inscription that said, "Disaster runs rampant throughout the world, and all who live do so in agony. All beings suffer in war." I believe this ring may have been intended as a gift for Guizhong, much like the primordial jade cutter. Perhaps after Morax killed Guizhong, he made the engraving on the ring and hid it away in the ruins at Kujue Slope. Kujue Slope itself is shrouded in darkness, which could be the lingering effects of Guizhong, with the darkness perhaps being caused by her dust. There is also one more set of objects that seems to be made from jade that I'd like to bring up, which is the new artifact set in version 2.6, Echoes of an Offering. Now, at the time of this recording, I have no idea if this set's lore is about Guizhong or not, but by the time this video is released, the update will be out and we will know the lore behind the set. Either way, I do strongly believe that this artifact set will provide us with some more lore on Guizhong, and if it does, next week's video will definitely be about this set. Those are all of my thoughts on Guizhong though. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below too. Anyways, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have an amazing day, and I'll see you all in the next video.